Wow, welcome, early bird Stephanie Carpenter. Welcome, Jennifer. Hi. Nice to see you in this space. My name is Nikki Schauder. My husband David's on the line as well. And our guest speaker, Shea Conlan, as well. Welcome, all of you. I just wanted so this beginning portion, 15 minutes before, we usually reserve to get to know each other. If you guys have any questions, you can test out. You can already ask them right away. Tell us where you're growing from, and what your interest in seeds is. Go ahead. So there's Shea. Hi, Shea.
Hi.
So, and if you feel shy and you don't want to use your mic or your video, I mean, you feel free to unmute yourselves or use your mic. Hey, Stephanie. You can definitely use the chat option in the bottom part here. Shea is the Educational Outreach Coordinator at Seed Savers Exchange, and she will be answering any questions as we present to you a video from Seed Savers Exchange because this is a presentation that they do a lot. So, but Shea is an expert in other things as well. So if you have any specific questions, I know I would have a lot of questions. So you feel free to type that in the chat box as we go forward, as we start at 8 o'clock. Okay, and then if you want to let us know where you are coming from, where you're growing from, please type that in the chat box as well. If you're shy, or unmute yourselves in the mic and let us know. So I'm Nikki. My husband Dave and I are from Sterling, Virginia. That's basically the suburbs of Virginia, close to the Dulles airport. So if you'd be flying here from anywhere in the world, you'd come through Dulles, and we live like 5 to 10 minutes away from there. Our climate is zone 7B. It's pretty rainy. It's a real ideal climate. Milford, Ohio, welcome. Wow. Okay, there. My screen's going on and off. Chowder family. Oh, okay. So yes, the rest of our family is also here. We have 70 people registered for this webinar today, Shea.
Nice.
So not everybody's going to be online, but a lot of people are probably going to do replays as well. So it'll be great.
Cool.
Shea, where did your interest in seed saving start, and how did you get into the Seed Savers Exchange working for them?
So I studied horticulture. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I studied horticulture at the University of Georgia, actually. So we're in Iowa, Seed Savers is, so it's a bit of a different climate up here for me. But yeah, I worked at a garden, at my university's garden, and I worked at a garden after college as well. And the program I manage now at Seed Savers, the Community Seed Resource Program, my former supervisor was actually a part of that program. So that's how I heard about Seed Savers. And even though I'd studied horticulture, I had never heard of seed saving until I heard of the organization. So
wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of it seems like a funny thing to me to have studied horticulture and no one is talking about seed saving. So here I am trying to spread the word.
Now there are other seed saving organizations out there, right? No, but you seem to be the foremost, like most prominent, longest running one in the US.
Yep.
All right. Well, a few housekeeping rules that I will from Raleigh, North Carolina. Welcome, Jennifer. Thanks for hopping in early. And like I said, this is a getting to know you part. We have virtual hors d'oeuvres usually. And I have, actually tonight we don't have hors d'oeuvres because we wanted to show you, Shea, and the rest of you guys, this melon. David, maybe you would like to explain a little bit about what happened to this melon and ask our question.
Oh, I just had a question about partial partial germination, not germination, partial pollination. Like when you have a melon or fruit that doesn't reach full size, why does it only have like a partial pollination? It's obviously been pollinated somewhat.
Right. This was new to me. They showed me a fruit. I think it was some sort of squash that was like that. It was like one side of the squash was really large and the other side wasn't. And it just didn't, I don't know the specifics, it just didn't get fully pollinated. So all of the seeds didn't set. So just uneven seed set, I guess. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's multiple seeds that need to get pollinated in a single fruit. Is that the?
Yeah. So it depends on the fruit type and how it's arranged. Yeah, I wish I could tell you more about that. Yeah, it's just different kinds of fruits. Yeah. So.
Okay.
I don't know more about that.
Thanks.
Well, I wanted to show them, where is that book of mine? See, oh, here it is. So this is now like one of my favorite bedside reading books right now. And it is a book that's published by Seed Savers Exchange that I got for myself. Disclaimer, I paid like full price for this. But it has a lot of beautiful pictures, and I think if I get through it, Dave, I might learn the answer to your question, because it seems to be really thorough. And this is the resource I used to create the primer on seeds that I sent out to people earlier in the day. It's just like a recap of our high school science or fourth grade science on the anatomy of a flower and how a seed is made in the first place. So welcome, Camille. All right, we have about 5 minutes, and I just wanted to go through some housekeeping rules here, I guess. So I'm going to share my screen for a bit. Okay, so because this particular webinar is a bit heavy, like on the note-taking side, I do encourage you to like turn off cell phones, put the kids to bed if you have them. Like my kid is still going to bed, so however you can, to be fully engaged really in the moment here and try to absorb as much as we can from the presentation and from the question and answers that we might have. Grab a notebook or note-taking device, because even I have to like remind myself what it is. There are too many things to remember, but it's simple because we're only gonna boil it down to 3 things, because that's all we can remember, like 1, 2, 3, and more. So just three things that we're going to be presented in this video tonight that we can work on towards seed saving. So 3 particular fruits or veggies that we're going to be able to save seeds from, that we should start with as beginners. Right, Shea?
Right, yeah.
And then use the chat. Yeah, use the chat box on the bottom right to ask any questions throughout the night. And at the end, if you still have questions, live questions, more than welcome right now or at the end of the presentation. And then stay till the end, because we have 2 quiz questions that we're going to be drawing from the presentation. So just like, they're not hard. And at the end of the night, then you guys get a prize of seeds if you get them. So far it's seeds, but who knows? There might be something more. So with that, I will stop share. We have 8 people online right now. Welcome, Chris. And Shea, David, John. All right, so we have 8 people online, and we are about 4 more minutes away. So I will, anything else, Shea, that you wanted to say about Seed Savers Exchange while we have a few minutes?
I could give a little introduction. How many, I guess, I don't know if I can get an answer like that. How many people on the call are already familiar with Seed Savers Exchange? Does anyone? Right, I'll give you just like a little background about it. So Seed Savers started in 1975 with our co-founders Diane Whaley and Kent Whaley. So they began with these 2 seeds. Diane's grandfather actually gave her the seeds to Grandpa Ott's. Grandpa Ott was his name, his morning glory seeds, as well as seeds to German pink tomato. And she had grown up helping her grandfather save these seeds and didn't know the story until later. So her grandpa told her the story that his grandparents had immigrated over from Bavaria, Germany, and carried these seeds with them. So they'd been in the family for generations. And Diane realized the importance of keeping these seeds safe as her grandfather was dying, and realizing that they might be the only ones in the U.S. with this particular variety of seeds. So her and her husband reached out to other gardeners in the area that first year to see if anyone else had seeds that were important to their family, varieties that had been in their family or that they found special or that they were unique to their culture. And that first year, they had response from 29 gardeners around the U.S. And today, that group has grown to about 11,000 members we have today. And they sent out a little publication of just a few pages, I think 6 pages, with listings of all the varieties that they had so that these gardeners could swap with each other. And today we have about 450 pages. It's like a phone book of seeds that our members are swapping with each other. So that's how we got started about 40 years ago. Now we have 60 full-time staff, and we have over 25,000 varieties in our collection. So,
gosh, that's amazing. Wow, I think for me, the stories behind the seeds, sorry that I'm fuzzy, is for me the most compelling reason. That's what got me interested in Seed Savers as well, because Tor Jansen, one of the Seed Savers staff, had given a talk, and it was story after story of these generational stories of 100 years ago of Americans going out west and mothers giving seeds to their daughters, saying, this is for you to plant now that you're getting married. This is my wedding gift for you, and you are big enough. It was just like a tradition that's passed on. And Tor himself said that his own grandparents, it was common for them to do that. The women in his lineage, in his ancestry. So many story, like interwoven American stories that I found. Well, I wanna start keeping this story going, because and correct me if I'm wrong, Shea, in the South, there is a seed. What is the seed that is not being saved anymore? It's not the root of
collard greens.
Collard
right?
greens, right? Yes, is that correct?
Oh, yeah, that's what was Tor talking about that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, the collard, because it's such a cultural tradition in the South, and now there's still the cultural tradition of eating collard, but they've separated from that tradition of growing and saving the seeds from these varieties. So yeah, Tor's working on a project to try to, renew that interest and reconnect that part of the cycle.
Great. Well, it's 8:00, and I'm going to start the video presentation, which is a few minutes long. Then we'll open up for Q&A and the quiz after. And here we go. Like I said, use the chat box, guys, for any questions you have.
Thanks for coming, everyone. It's great to see so many people here, and it's great to see some returning folks as well. It's good to see names come week after and start participating in the type of preservation work that we do here at Seed Savers Exchange. So for those who aren't necessarily familiar with Seed Savers Exchange, our mission is to save North America's diverse but endangered garden heritage for future generations by building a network of people committed to collecting, conserving, and sharing heirloom seeds and plants, while educating people about the value of genetic and cultural diversity. Seed Savers Exchange got our start, sort of as the name would imply, as an exchange. Seed Savers started with a few different gardeners growing seeds every year and then sharing those seeds between one another. And that exchange is still going on. And so this presentation is sort of going to give you the skills to participate in that exchange yourselves, and also to grow things and save seeds year after year for your own gardens, and for your neighbors and your friends and family. We'll talk a little bit more about the exchange at the end, but I think we can move into the presentation now. One of the reasons that it's really important for people to save their seeds, there's several reasons, everything from plant breeding, from growing things that will continue to do well in your garden and adapting those varieties to your particular area, saving money sometimes. One of the big ones this diagram sort of illustrates, this is an illustration of variety within seed catalogs. And so at the top part of this diagram, you can see the number of varieties that were offered in 1903 in different seed catalogs around the country. And then the bottom part of the diagram is 80 years later. So in 1983, they did a survey of varieties in the National Seed Storage Laboratory, and the number at the bottom is how many left of the original varieties they found. So for example, I think cabbage is probably the most extreme. In 1903, there were 544 cabbage varieties offered in seed catalogs around the country. In 1983, they went back and looked to see how many of those varieties were still around, and there's only 28 that are available in a gene bank, not just available commercially, but these are varieties these are the only varieties we have left, to our knowledge. Those other 500, some may be extinct. So just another sort of reason why, beyond just personal reasons of saving seeds, why it's more important to preserve that biodiversity in our garden crops. This is going to be just a short outline of things we're going to cover today. We're going to come back to some of these concepts, but I wanted to introduce them first here. So seed saving is the process of saving seeds from open pollinated fruits, vegetables, grains, flowers, and herbs. This is what traditional agriculture has relied on year after year to maintain both farms and gardens. Even prior to World War I, seed catalogs weren't as popular as they are today. A lot of people relied on saving their own seeds, exchanging seeds with friends and neighbors and family to obtain their seeds. It's pretty recently that gardeners have really relied exclusively on seed catalogs. And so by seed saving, you're sort of participating in this traditional form of agriculture, linking yourself back to gardeners and generations of the past. When you save seeds from a particular plant variety, you want those seeds to grow into a plant that is identical to its parent plants. So this trait is known as varietal purity. And this is what separates open pollinated varieties and hybrid varieties. So an open pollinated variety exhibits varietal purity and breeds true from seed. Open pollinated varieties are maintained by allowing a natural flow of pollen between plants of the same variety. Open pollinated varieties are the varieties that you will use for seed saving, especially for beginners. You can save seeds from hybrids and eventually stabilize them and get the variety you want. But if you want to grow a variety year after year, it needs to be an open pollinated variety. When pollen flows between different varieties within the same species, this is known as cross-pollination. And cross-pollinated seed is not ideal for seed saving, especially when you want to preserve a variety. So for us here at Heritage Farm, where we're maintaining these varieties that are in some cases hundreds of years old, it's very important for us to maintain the characteristics of each variety. If you're seed saving at home, it's not necessarily as important. If you have a little bit of cross-pollinated seed, you should still plant it, you should still grow it out the next year and see what you get. So this is a little bit of an illustration to kind of show what I mean when I'm talking about cross-pollination. So let's say you have a tomato variety that you're trying to preserve the characteristics of this tomato variety. Got a red, big sort of almost beefsteak tomato with sort of a ribbed shape. You plant that seed in your garden, plant grows up, produces these fruits. And so the next year you want to be able to save these seeds, plant them and get the exact same or something very similar. You want to get that same tomato plant. But if, let's say, you plant a tiny yellow orange tomato next to your big ribbed red tomato, what can happen is if pollen moves between these two varieties in the same species, is you can end up with something like this. You might get a large ribbed orange tomato. And if you're just doing it for your own home use, this might be something neat that you find. It's not necessarily a bad tomato, it's just a different tomato than what you expected and maybe than what you wanted. A lot of seed saving and a lot of the concepts when we have discussed seed saving in the past and other webinars, a lot of the things that we've talked about are how to isolate these varieties from one another and how to be able to grow a few different varieties in the same species without this cross-pollination happening. What we've done for the Seed Saving for Beginners presentation is we've sort of taken that out of it. So we've chosen 3 plant types: beans, lettuce, and tomatoes. And these are 3 varieties that aren't prone to cross-pollinate. So the example I just showed in the previous slide with the tomatoes, it's not as likely that a tomato will cross-pollinate with neighboring tomatoes. And so by starting with these 3 crops, and you could use peas as well. Peas are really similar to beans. You can use other plants that share these same characteristics as the plants we're going to talk about today. But this sort of takes a lot of the, I don't know, maybe the more technical things out of the process. So this presentation is going to talk just briefly on pollination, whereas pollination takes up the bulk of some of our other presentations. And this will sort of focus on what to do after you've grown your varieties and how to process them and dry them and store them for the next year. The reason that these 3 varieties have chosen, they're all chosen because they're annuals. So you can plant them in the spring, and by the fall you'll have seeds that you can save for next year. And also they're self-pollinating plants, and so that means that each flower will pollinate itself. So if you think about squash, for example, squash have really big flowers. Squash have male and female flowers, and they're really attractive to insects. They invite insects and they require them to pollinate. And so those are very prone to cross-pollinating with other varieties that you might have planted near, whereas beans, peas, and lettuce and tomatoes don't generally cross-pollinate. So this is a picture of a pea flower, actually. It's not a bean flower, but they're very similar in structure. So you can see in the flower on the left is the whole flower. In the flower on the right, I took off the wing petals, so you can see those darker red petals have been removed. And by removing them, you can see the keel, which sort of covers up the reproductive organs of that pea plant. And so what happens is that there are male and female parts behind that keel. And because the keel is there, it prevents insects from getting inside and from moving pollen around and from moving pollen between different varieties. So the next slide shows it with the keel removed. This keel sort of protects it from cross-pollination, and it makes it a very easy plant to save seed from. Tomatoes have another mechanism for preventing cross-pollination. And so this is a tomato flower here. That cone in the middle is actually, it's called an anther cone, or the anthers are fused together. So the anthers are the male part of the plant. They're the part that produces the pollen. And the stigma is the female part of the flower. The stigma is actually buried inside of those anthers. So those anthers totally enclose the female part of the plant that would receive pollen either from this flower or from other flowers. But because it's totally enclosed by these pollen-producing anthers, it's very unlikely that pollen is going to somehow travel through the tip of that cone and pollinate that flower. So tomatoes are another great one for seed saving. I don't have a photo of a lettuce flower, but lettuce flowers as well are not prone to cross-pollination. What happens is as the stigma develops, it brushes through all of the anthers, and so the stigma is pollinated basically before it's receptive to any other pollen. So lettuce is another excellent plant for beginners for that reason. Now that we know a little bit about the plants, there's a few questions that you should ask as you're starting to save seeds. This applies to these 3 plants, but also to many other plant types as well. But the first question to ask is your plant a hybrid or an OP, or an open pollinated variety? Explained a little bit about why we want OPs. So OPs are plants that will produce seed that can grow up to be like its parents, as long as there's no cross-pollination. Whereas hybrid varieties, on the other hand, hybrid plants will not reliably produce seed that will grow up to be like its parents. So When you're starting out especially, you really want to make sure that you have an open pollinated variety. And you can determine that pretty easily. Most seed packets will list whether or not it's a hybrid or an OP. I just included some examples here, some varieties that people are familiar with. Some of the popular hybrid tomatoes there, Sun Gold, Big Boy, Early Girl, Celebrity. Those are varieties of tomatoes that you shouldn't maybe try to save seed from on your first go around especially. And then some popular heirloom tomatoes there, Brandywine, Amish Paste, and Black Crim. And so those are varieties that you might want to try out this summer. The next question to ask is, what is your plant species? A lot of you probably recognize the classification system on the screen there with kingdom, division, class, order, family, genus, species. Luckily, you don't need to know all of those. You know, as a gardener, you should be familiar with your plant's family, but for seed saving purposes, it's most important to just know your plant's genus and species. That makes up the binomial name or the scientific name or the Latin name. It's important to know the scientific name because common names can be quite misleading. When I say bean can mean a lot of things to different people. If I say bean, maybe somebody's thinking about lima beans, but if I say Phaseolus vulgaris, that's the binomial name, the scientific name, that refers to one very specific bean. And so it's important to know that because Phaseolus vulgaris will only cross with other Phaseolus vulgaris beans. So it won't cross with runner beans, which are Phaseolus coccineus. They won't cross with lima beans, Phaseolus lunatus, and they won't cross with fava beans either. Another question to ask as you're approaching sort of harvest time is your plant mature? So this is a photo of lettuce through its life cycle. So it starts with seed, you have little seedlings, and then eventually those grow up to be what we would often call market mature. So the photo second from the left, this is when you would eat the lettuce. But the photo on the right, you can kind of see, especially in the back, you can see that lettuce is bolted. And some people are familiar with lettuce bolting, and some people think about, okay, the lettuce is bolted, I can't eat it anymore, now I better cut it out. That bolting stage of lettuce is the stage in which it starts sending up a flower stalk that'll eventually produce flowers that'll be pollinated and then produce seed. So if you're trying to save seeds from lettuce, you can't cut the lettuce plant off at the ground and harvest it and eat it. You can pick the leaves off the edges if you'd like, and then eventually it'll go to seed, and then you won't want to necessarily eat it. So it's important to know not just when your plant is mature, ready for eating, but also it's important to know when your seed is mature. And we'll talk a little bit about that with each individual crop as well. Another sort of question to ask is how many plants are you growing in your garden? With these varieties, you can grow a couple different plants of each variety and then save seed from those few different plants. You know, as home gardeners, you don't necessarily have room for 10 tomato plants, or you don't necessarily want to grow 10 different tomato plants. If you can grow 10 tomato plants, that's great, but if you can at least grow a few tomato plants within the same variety that you're saving seed from, that would be great, and that certainly helps keep those genetics diverse. A lot of people have questions, so after the seed is processed and harvested, how do I dry the seeds? This is corn that's drying in some bags that we have hanging up in our barn. When you're drying seeds, typically you want them out of the sunlight. You want them in a place that gets a lot of air. So for example, we open up the barn door and let the corn just air dry in there in the dark. We also have cabinets with fans on either end, and we'll put seeds in there and let them dry. The simplest way to do it is just to put them on a screen or a coffee filter on a paper plate and put them in a place that gets some wind if you want. You can put some fans on them as well and dry them out that way. We'll talk a little bit more about how you know when your seed is dry enough, but this is one of the final processes as you're saving your seeds. And then seed storage. This is a photograph of one of our seed rooms. This room, I think, is kept maybe in the 30s. We have our seed vault where we maintain seeds for a long time. Ideal storage conditions are -3 degrees and between 5 and 8% humidity, but I can't think of any home gardeners that have that sort of facility. So what we recommend is that you dry it out and then you put it in a place that doesn't get sunlight, put it in a place that's kind of cool. You could, for example, put it in a paper bag and then stick it in a cupboard on the north side of your house. And those seeds will last 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Some people ask about putting them in refrigerators, and we don't generally recommend that unless the seed is very dry unless the seed is in an airtight container. Instead of putting it in the refrigerator or the freezer, I would put it in a dark place that isn't very humid. Maybe it gets a little bit of airflow, but certainly what you want to keep in mind as you're storing your seeds is that when you want seeds to germinate, they need warmth and moisture. And so when you're storing seeds, you want to keep those two things away from the seeds. You want to keep them very dry, and you want to keep them cooler as well. If you store them in an airtight container and they're not dry enough, sometimes that moisture that's trapped inside the airtight container will cause them to sprout. So we're going to go through each plant type individually now and sort of explain from start to finish how to save seeds from each different plant type. So tomatoes, the tomato species name there, Solanum lycopersicum, it's in the family. The nightshade family, it's in the same family as potatoes and eggplant, peppers. Tomato seeds are ready for harvest when the fruits are ripe. So when you're ready to eat the tomato, generally the seeds are ready as well. You can leave it sit on the vine a little bit longer if it's if the tomato fruit gets a little bit mushier than usual, a little bit overripe. The seeds are just fine, but you don't necessarily want the tomato to start rotting. You want to harvest the seeds before then. So tomato seeds are ready to harvest when the fruits are ripe. I have an illustration on the next slide, but I wasn't sure if the text would show up. So I'm going to go through these steps here, and then I'll go through them again in the next slide. Scoop or squeeze out the seeds into a tall container, and then add a bit of water to the container. Let the water, seed, pulp mixture ferment for 1 to 2 days. And that fermentation process is really important. Tomato seeds, if anybody's tried saving tomato seeds before, is familiar with cutting open a tomato and scooping out the seeds, they have almost like a mucilaginous sac around them. And so that sac around the seeds is actually the ovary, or the placenta, I should say. That has a germination inhibitor in it. So if you think about the inside of a tomato, it's moist, it's warm. It's a really ideal place for seeds to sprout, but you don't want seeds sprouting inside of the tomato as the tomato is still on the plant. Each seed has a sac around it that inhibits germination, so it prevents it from sprouting inside the tomato. So the fermentation process breaks down that seed coat, and then you can start drying it and saving it again for next year. After the mixture has fermented for 1 to 3 days, you'll notice that there's a little layer of mold that develops on the top. So after the mold develops on the surface, fill the container with water. You're going to stir the mixture and pour off the floating seeds, pulp, and mold. So all of the good seeds will sink to the bottom, so you'll pour off everything that's floating. You can fill up the container again and mix it up and pour off the new stuff that develops as well. So you can do that a few different times. It's called decanting. After that, you can spread the seeds out to dry on a screen or a coffee filter, rinse them off a little bit, and then stir the seeds around every day as they're drying. I've heard that putting seeds on paper towel, they kind of tend to stick to paper towel, not so much to coffee filters. We use screens ourselves here with coffee filters on top of the screens, and then stir them around every few days. They tend to stick together otherwise. And then the tomato seeds are dry enough for storage when they break rather than bend under stress. So this is a kind of a rudimentary test where you can tell if your seeds are dry enough for storage or not. If you take the tomato seed between your fingers and try to bend it, if it snaps, then it's ready for storage. If it kind of bends a little bit first, probably needs to be dried a little bit further. So this is a graphic that kind of illustrates what I've just gone through. So they're in the first image, cutting the tomatoes open, squeezing the pulp, juice, and seeds into a glass or plastic container. The second image there is the fermentation process. So you can see that mold developing on the surface of the mixture. It can happen in 24 hours to 4 days. And then after that mold has developed, fill it up with water, and then dump out all that floating debris on the top that isn't good seed. After that, you can put it in a strainer, wash it, rinse it off a little bit, and then after that fourth image, spread them out thinly on a surface to dry. And it recommends coffee filters, paper plates, wax paper, and then it says there, as we already discussed a little bit, it's best to dry seeds out of direct sunlight, and it can take up to 4 weeks. And again, when it passes that break test, when it snaps rather than bends, then it's ready for storage. The next plant type we'll talk about is beans. So bean pods should be left on the vine to dry, until they're brown and crisp. You can pick the pods from the plant when the beans inside are extremely hard. If you have a lot of plants, you can pick the whole plant if you want, and then the threshing stage will be a little bit harder. If you're not growing a lot of them, I would just pick the pods by hand. So you can split the pods by hand, or one way that we've done it in the past, and we do this with kids a lot because it's really fun, fill a feed sack or a pillowcase with seed pods, tie it shut, and then basically jog around in place on top of it to remove the seeds. You can roll around on top of it. You can throw it around. I read in a book about beans the other day where somebody tied it up like a piñata and hit it with a stick. And what that does is it splits open the pods, and so all of the beans are freed then from the pods. And then that makes this next step, the winnowing step, easier. So winnowing can be used to separate chaff from seeds. So there's an illustration in a couple slides here, but you're going to pour the seeds and chaff from one basket to another, letting the wind blow away the chaff. Maybe some of you have heard the expression separating the wheat from the chaff. This is exactly what you're going to do, except you're going to be separating the beans from the chaff. You're going to dry the bean seeds on a screen until they pass the shatter test. So this is a little bit similar, but maybe more fun than the snap or bend test. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a bean that you've had that's been drying for a while, put it on a hard surface, and then hit it with a hammer. And so if the bean squishes a little bit, it's not quite ready. It should be dried further. But if it shatters, if it splits up, then it is ready for storage. This is a photo here of one of our employees last year. You can see in the photo he's got what looks like a pillow sack under his knee there. In that sack are a bunch of potted seeds. And so what he's doing is he's eating them up. He's stopping on them and kneeling on them. That is separating the seeds from the pods. Winnowing, this is a photo of, this is a grain being winnowed here, but it kind of shows the idea of what you're trying to do. So you can see they're pouring both the seeds and the chaff from a distance, and then the wind is blowing the chaff, which is lighter, and so the wind is blowing the chaff off to one side, and meanwhile the seeds, which are heavier, not as affected by the wind, are just dropping down straight. And so this is maybe one setup that you could use. This is one of our advisors, Will Bonzo. He's doing a winnowing workshop at last year's conference that we had here. So you can see on the left side of the screen, he has a fan set up. If it's not that windy, maybe if the chaff is a little bit heavier, you can set up a fan like that, and then you'll have the chaff and the seeds, and then you'll pour it basically in front of that fan. And so right below the fan, and right where his right foot is, you would put a bucket to catch all the seeds, and then the fan would blow all the chaff away. And so this is a really, if you have quite a few seeds that you're trying to process, you can, of course, do it by hand. You can split the beans by hand and just simply separate the seeds that way. But if you have quite a few that you're trying to process, winnowing is kind of a quick way to do it, and it's really fun. The last plant then that we'll talk about is lettuce. Lettuce seeds are ready for harvest 2 to 3 weeks after the plant has flowered. So this is one, because lettuce seeds are so tiny, it is kind of difficult to determine whether or not the seeds are mature. So maybe put a mark on your calendar or make a note of when the plant starts to flower. Leave the plants in the ground and then harvest the seeds over the course of a few days by visiting the plant and shaking the seed heads into a paper bag. So lettuce seeds mature at different times. As you'll notice, if anybody's had lettuce that's bolted and gone to flower, the flowers open at different times over the course of a few weeks. And so you'll want to, over the course of a few days, visit each plant, shake the seed heads into a paper bag, and the ones that are mature will drop down. If you are I don't know, if you're in a hurry or if you're not so concerned about getting as many seeds as you possibly can, you can pull up the whole lettuce plant, shake the seed heads into a paper bag, and then leave the plant inside the paper bag upside down. And those seeds will continue to mature. You won't get as many as if you visited the plant over the course of a few days, but you can do that. It makes it a little bit easier maybe to just pull up the whole plant. To clean the seeds then, use a fine mesh screen that will allow seeds to pass through but will restrict the white feathers or larger chaff. Lettuce seeds have feathers kind of like dandelions that help it to be dispersed by the wind. The lettuce seeds are super light. If you tried to winnow them, all the seeds would blow all over the place. It wouldn't be much good. So using the screening method is really the best way to ensure that your seed is getting cleaned effectively. Seeds are dry enough for storage, again, the same as the tomatoes. when they break rather than bend under stress. So you can do that same test as you did for tomatoes to determine whether lettuce is dry enough for storage. This is a photo here of screening. So you can see in the screen on the top, the holes are a little bit wider. You can see in the screen at the bottom, the seeds are small enough that the holes are small enough that the seeds won't fall through. So what happens is that the seeds fall through the bigger holes in the screen on top. You know how the chaff is left up on top, and then the seeds fall below, but the holes below are too small to allow the seed through, but they might let dirt through and other things that you don't want necessarily in your seed. You don't have to use screens like this. You can use different hardware cloths, whatever you have on hand, or if you need to make a little screen. If you don't have the screen, you can do it by hand as well. You can kind of blow very lightly on lettuce seeds and it'll separate some of the feathers from the seeds as well. But screening is kind of the most effective way of processing the lettuce seeds. And this is just a photo I included, kind of where our gardens are right now. We've got some lettuce that's starting to bolt, so you can see in a few of the lettuce plants in the photo, they're starting to get taller. That's when they're bolting, so maybe in a few weeks they're going to start producing flower heads that'll open up, and then the seeds will start to mature a few weeks after that. The last thing I'll mention and talk about a little bit is our Seed Savers Exchange yearbook. So as I mentioned at the beginning, Seed Savers Exchange started as an exchange. So gardeners from around the country and from Canada as well, growing seeds out, sharing them between one another. That first year they had 30 people about. Now we have 13 or 14,000 people that are exchanging seeds, very much in the same way. So we have about 700 people that offer seeds in the yearbook. A lot of people are familiar with our catalog, and we send our catalog to everyone. The yearbook is only offered to Seed Savers Exchange members. If you want to find more about membership, I would definitely suggest going onto our website and looking at some of the information we have about membership. But this yearbook has nearly 13,000 different varieties in it, grown by other gardeners. So how the exchange works is that we contact different people who have grown seeds in the past, the new people who are growing seeds this year. We ask them what seeds they're growing, what seeds they're going to be offering to other growers, and then we put that all in this book. This book is about 500 pages, and it has many different plant types. Like I said, about close to 13,000 seeds. I think close to or over 4,000 tomatoes alone. This presentation is sort of meant to give people the tools to participate in this yearbook and participate in this exchange. You can sell seeds through our catalog, but we would love it if individual gardeners were growing seeds year after year, preserving rare varieties. Preserving these varieties in some cases is, it's up to organizations like us, but especially it's up to individual gardeners doing this work in their backyard. We want to encourage people, if you are saving seeds this year, to start offering seeds in the yearbook. Please visit our website. Please visit some of the other resources that we have to talk more generally and a little bit more detailed about seed saving, especially with other plant types. So the three that we've covered are a little bit easier. They should be a little bit less intimidating, but we certainly want you to, if you become comfortable with these varieties, start growing with these plant types, start growing other plant types as well. Thank you again for coming, and hope to see you back at future webinars.
So that was Grant of Seed Savers Exchange, and now I'll open it questions for Shea, Shea is the Education Outreach Coordinator at Seed Savers Exchange. She studied English and horticulture at the University of Georgia and previously worked as an environmental educator at Rock Eagle 4-H Center. Shea helps manage the community seed resource program and develops educational resources on seed saving. So Shea, take it away, and let's see. What questions do we have for her, Dave? Are there any questions that came through the chat?
Not yet, but feel free to fire away with your questions.
Oh, Stephanie says, thank you all for the great info.
Awesome.
Well, let me see here. Here is their website in case you guys want to learn more. seedsavers.org. Chris Wilson raised her hand. Yes, Chris. Go ahead and unmute your mic. Chris?
Yes, hi Nikki. I was wondering, like, but if you join the Seed Savers Exchange and you don't have seeds to put in, can you buy seeds, or how does that work?
Yep, so anyone can buy seeds. If you go to our website, seedsavers.org/shop, you can find all of the seeds that we offer in our catalog. So the catalog's open to everyone, and we offer about 600 varieties a year in that. And the exchange is just our like member-to-member seed swap, and it gives you access to more varieties, both that gardeners have, but also some of the varieties from our collection that we don't offer in the catalog. But anyone can buy seeds through our website.
Thanks.
Yep.
Good question.
So Remus is asking about pepper seed saving.
Yep, so pepper seed saving isn't especially difficult. We don't include it in the beginner seed saving because it's not self-pollinating. So this presentation didn't touch on this too much, but when a plant is primarily cross-pollinating, they need to be separated from other varieties of that same species. So if you were only growing one variety of peppers, then you could save seeds from that pretty easily. You would save seeds from the red peppers, or I guess it depends on the variety, the not green stage when it's reached its final color. But, right, so if you wanted to grow multiple varieties of peppers and you wanted to save seeds from even just one of those, you would have to make sure that those two peppers were separated from each other so that bees couldn't carry pollen between the two. And then there's a couple of, it's fairly simple to save pepper seeds, but if they're hot peppers, you have to be a little bit careful about saving those seeds, just wearing like protective gloves and goggles and such. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I got you. So, I mean, if you're growing multiple kinds of peppers and you harvest the seeds from any one, like if it's a habanero pepper, what you grow out of those seeds could be completely different depending on what other cross-pollinators you have.
Yep, so any variety that's in the same species can cross-pollinate. And so if a bee carried a variety or the pollen from one variety to another, then the seed you saved wouldn't be that same variety. So if you planted that next year, it could have, it would be an unpredictable pepper. It wouldn't be necessarily either one of the varieties that got crossed, because it could have any number of those characteristics.
Cool. Continuing to hybridize, I guess that's why the hottest pepper keeps getting hotter all the time. Everybody keeps combining genetics of, something, putting it together.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it can be, I mean, people, that's how over time people create new varieties through that type of, playful plant breeding, but it takes a long time to stabilize a variety that way.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Camille says, it looks like that they are not all organic on the site. Guessing they're at least all non-GMO. Is that correct, Shea?
Yep. So right now in the U.S. there's only a few types of plants to begin with that are GMO, but none of the plants we sell are GMO. Our farm is totally certified organic, so everything we're growing on the farm is organic. But we have such a large number of seeds and such a large quantity that we have some contractors grow some of our seeds as well. So we're working towards becoming more, getting more of our varieties to be organic, but everything that we grow on the farm is organic.
Okay, thank you.
And hey, had one other quick question. My wife's sitting here and she was just chiming in about how we'd love to grow beets, but we don't know where beet seeds come from. So is that a particularly difficult process to save beet seeds, or?
So beets are biennials, which means that they don't produce seed. They don't produce their fruit and set seed until the second season after a period of cold, so overwintering. So it's definitely trickier to save seeds from beets, and it's why people aren't really familiar with what a beet seed looks like or what it looks like when that plant goes to seed, because we usually eat the plants before it gets to that stage. So if you're in the South, you could keep that beet in the ground all winter, probably, depending on your zone. But up here, if we want to save seeds from beets, we have to keep them in a root cellar over winter. So we have to dig up the plant before it gets to frost, and we put it in the root cellar and prepare it a certain way to keep it cold and keep it alive. And then we have to replant it in the spring, and then it flowers and sets seed. So it's a bit of a trickier process.
Gotcha. How many seeds do you get off of a single plant?
That is a great question. So I don't have the exact answer for beet, but for a comparison for how many plants you need to save seed from to get viable seeds, lettuce, you only need to save seed from one plant to get enough seed, because it produces over 1,000 seeds from one plant, although you'd want to save from more plants to keep that genetic diversity. But with beets, you would need to save seed from at least 5 plants to have enough seed. But I'm actually not, this will be my first time seeing beet seed as well since joining Seed Savers Exchange, so I'm not sure how many seeds one plant makes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've never seen it in that final stage too. I mean, every time you pull beet seeds out of a envelope to plant them, I was always wondering, like, okay, how do those get created? So it's good to know the second year process.
Yeah, I'll have to send Nikki afterwards when I'm at work. I can find a picture of what beet seeds look like and send it to you.
Yeah, great.
No, I mean, we've planted them a lot. I mean, I know what they are in their final form. It's just getting it through the flowering stage of the plant. I imagine if I saw it, it would be obvious. But I think we eat our beets before we let them get that far.
Right. Yeah, I think it looks different on the plant. It's like it's interesting looking.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate the insights. Had no ideas about the tomato plants too, and the embryo, and having to soak and ferment. I always was kind of curious. I thought it'd be obvious. It seems obvious, but it's those little details that if somebody doesn't teach you the way, you could waste a lot of time trying to germinate things that aren't going to work.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
We have a question from Jennifer Potenzano, asking about the difference between the Seed Savers Exchange catalog and the yearbook.
So the catalog is where we started. So when Diane and Kent started the organization, they weren't planning on creating a catalog to sell the seeds. So the catalog is how we sell the seeds, and it helps us fulfill our mission because we can get more of these rare and heirloom varieties into people's backyards, so that these varieties can stay around just because people want to grow them. But the yearbook offers more varieties, and that's where we started. So the yearbook is an exchange. So the yearbook has what the varieties are and contact information of the person who's listing it, so that you can connect directly person to person and request seeds. And it's not a for-profit thing. There's some exchange of money as far as paying for postage to be able to ship the seeds, but it's really our way of trying to connect more gardeners directly to each other to share the seeds that they've been saving. Does that make sense?
The person asked on a chat, so yeah, I think that makes sense. So the Seed Savers catalog is how you make money, and then the yearbook is the exchange.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. And 2 participants raised hands. Carmel Wiseman. Go ahead. There.
Okay, this is actually Mark. He's going to ask the question.
Okay, Mark.
Hi, this is Mark Wiseman. How do you identify what seed somebody should plant? Do you have genetic testing?
I can't really hear it all the way. Could someone repeat that?
Do you have genetic How do you identify what seed you have?
Oh, look at that.
Okay, I think
I'm hearing multiple things.
I'm sorry, but I don't know where the mute needs to be, which people need to be muted. Kindly mute your, if you're not Mark or Carmel, kindly mute yourself, and if you are Mark or Carmel, kindly unmute yourself.
I think it's Camille. Can you mute her, Nikki?
Oh, sorry. Okay. All right. I got that.
Can you hear
Okay,
us?
can you hear?
Yes, I think I can hear you now.
Okay. The question is, if you receive a seed, do you do any kind of testing to verify the variety? Is there a way to genetically test a seed?
Oh, so there is, but we don't do genetic testing at Seed Savers Exchange. So are you asking about like when we at Seed Savers Exchange receive a variety that's been donated?
Yes.
Yep, so it's kind of an interesting process. So Seed Savers grew so quickly and so many people donated seeds kind of faster than we could keep up with. So now we have a team that does evaluation on the varieties that we have. So they'll grow out, if they think a variety is potentially a duplicate, that they have two varieties that are actually the same variety, then they'll grow them side by side in just a small grow out. So we won't grow out a whole bunch of them and try to save seeds from them right away. So we'll grow them out side by side and observe all these different characteristics. They have a long list of things they look at, but how it tastes, when it flowers, what shape it is, and to see if all these things are uniform. So we can tell if they're the same variety that way, but we don't have the technology at Seed Savers Exchange to be doing genetic testing. So yeah, that's part of our process. Did I answer that? Is there?
Yes, that's good. Any more questions?
Yeah, what about cucumber seeds? Do you get the seed from the cucumber or from the flower?
So Carmel is asking about cucumber seeds. How do you save cucumber seeds?
Yep, so the cucumber, the fruit, so it flowers and then the fruit comes from the flower, but the seeds are inside. So cucumbers are one of the, unlike tomatoes, how the seed is mature at the same time that the fruit is ready to eat. With cucumbers, the fruit has to mature several weeks past the time when you would normally eat it. So, you know, normally it's depending on the variety, but it's green, it's firm. To save the seeds, you would leave it in the garden for a few weeks longer. It would become like yellow and soft, and that's when the seed is mature. So then it's a similar process to tomatoes then, because cucumbers also have kind of a little like gelatinous covering around the seed. They're a little bit trickier because they have to stay longer in the garden and because they're not self-pollinating, but still not terribly difficult to save seed from. So they're annuals, they mature in one season.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, and then Camille asked, I tried to be bold one day and randomly planted a garlic clove. Any clues to why nothing came up? Should I have prepared it in some way?
Okay, so I'll preface by saying I don't know a whole lot about garlic, but I don't know if you can type or if you can speak. Did you get it at just like a grocery store, or was it something that you, like, was it open pollinated?
Yes, she got it at the grocery store.
Yeah, so sometimes I'm not sure exactly what they do, but they're made so that they can't grow depending on where it comes from. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about garlic, but garlic, as you know, is propagated by, like, vegetatively by that clove and not by seed. So we have, I don't know, 300 varieties of garlic in our collection, and we have to plant them out each year.
Wow.
I can do some follow-up on that for you, but I believe it should just be able to put it in the garden and it should come up, but it also might be one that requires, yeah, I won't keep talking about that. I'll find an expert on garlic and get back to you about that.
Were you going to say requires a frigid period? The cold.
Yeah, like an overwintering, but I'm not sure if that's right because I think we just planted ours out.
They came out. I do remember, I to piggyback on what you said, I had a plant your pantry challenge for some people on permaculture gardens, and one of the things they tried planting was potatoes, and they said it never sprouted. And we found out later, because they were the non-organic kind, that they had been treated so that they'd never sprout again. So perhaps that would have been the case with the garlic, is what Shea was trying to say. All right, for cilantro. Remus, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, and I think for the garlic, you know, they always say plant it around Halloween, so it does overwinter and then it sprouts in the spring. So I think if you're going to plant it in the spring or during the summer, it may not be productive. It maybe does have that overwintering period. And yeah, potatoes are irradiated, I guess, what are they? Irradiated to prevent them, I guess, from sprouting or something. So for cilantro, you know, it grows very fast, it shoots up, and then the seed heads dry out. Can we like just cut the seed heads and then sow it again directly, like, you know, from, you know, harvest it off the plant and throw it directly back into the ground to do another batch?
That is a great question, and I'm not familiar with cilantro, but if the season was right, I don't see why not. I mean, when it grows in your garden, do you ever let it just like go to seed and see if it self seeds, like if it grows back from the?
It does, I think, like the next year mostly. So we'll see volunteers the following season, but this was like halfway through the season. So instead of like waiting for them to volunteer, came up or to save the seeds, we just directly, you know, harvested the seed heads and sowed them right back directly into the soil. So I mean, it's an experiment in process. I just wasn't sure if you know, we can anticipate, you know, success or a positive result, or if, you know, it might be something that we need to save for a period of time. I don't know.
No, I think theoretically it should just come up. There's no reason that it should like need to sit in storage or anything before it could germinate again.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure about viability and, you know, the moisture of it or something like that. If it was still part of the plant, if anything had to change, but we'll report back and let you know how it works out.
Yeah. Awesome.
I had a question about how the yearbook works.
Sure.
So I joined Seed Savers maybe in March. How do you collect everybody's seed information that they have to share?
Yeah, I think the deadline as far as the print yearbook, because the yearbook is the print version of the exchange, but online is ongoing. So you could be listing on there at any time and be getting responses. I need to double check this, but I think the deadline is like January to get anything that you want listed in the yearbook. And that's an online process as well. I believe we have an option for people who don't use the computer much to be able to write in with what they want listed and their contact information. I don't work with the exchange, so I'm not sure of the exact process, but I think it should have directions online, but I could also follow up with more information about that.
Okay, thanks.
All right, well, I just wanted to share this screen that in case you were wanting to buy seeds from seedsavers.org, they are offering a coupon of $5 off your next $25. But the offer is only available online and expires August 31. So and the code is permaculture SSE. So thank you so much, Shea, for arranging this for us.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Should we ask these questions? As I see, we don't, or is there anybody else who wants to ask questions before I ask the secret question. Previous slide. Anyone on the, okay, so type in 4 seeds coming from Seed Savers Exchange. And we have quite a number here in our seed library as well. So you may have your pick of what we have. Answer the following question by typing in your chat box. Oops, previous, there. Why are beans, lettuce, and tomatoes considered to be beginner crops for seed saving? So the first one to answer, and you can answer like without the chat box. If you're shy, you can use the chat box. If you wanna be fast, use your mic, unmute yourself.
Few answers.
What is,
You don't know the answer?
do we speak the answer?
Yes, you can speak the answer and you'll be the first.
They are annuals and they self-pollinate.
Very good. Yay, we will be in touch with you, Dr. Carmel and Mark, afterwards. And we have a second question. Why is knowing a plant species name important to seed savers? Anyone? Why is knowing a plant species name important to seed savers?
Tricky one, I guess.
Rima says to know what species it can pollinate, to prevent cross-pollination and preserve varietal purity, Jennifer says. All right, anyone else? Different species, different names. All right questions. Okay, common names can be misleading and the species name informs you on which plants will cross one another.
So a good example of that is the brassicas. So if you think of kale or broccoli, we often think of those as, they're distinct crop types, so we think they're different species, but they're actually the same species. So in that case, it'd be really important to know that they're the same species because they can cross-pollinate.
Great. And Rimas, Jennifer, and Mark, I'll just give it all to you guys. We've got lots of seeds, so we can Rimas, Jennifer, Mark, and the wise men. All right, congratulations, guys. Great. Well, let me see if I have any more slides to show. What is my end slide? That may be the end of it. Oh, yep, that's it. To learn more about seeds, seedsavers.org/learn. We encourage you, we are members of the Seed Savers Exchange as well. And this is a nonprofit. It's a nonprofit, and we just really feel passionate about promoting them. That's why we have a free webinar on them tonight. Thank you all for coming. Dave, am I missing anything? We will get in touch with those who won the seeds.
You said you had a handout or a...
Yes. So the replay of this will be made available to you by tomorrow. For those of you who are not here, and for those of you who want to see the replay, the handout I sent via email already. And if anybody still, the handout was just a primer, just so that some of the plant anatomy could be fleshed out before, as we went, and we could speed through the understanding of the slides tonight. That was my handout. But anything else, I guess I will leave you. Awesome. Thank you. Permaculture Gardens rocks. Rimas, thank you so much. The Chicotis family rocks. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thanks for everybody online. So I will leave you with a song from Formidable Vegetable, again, about diversity, because saving seeds increases our plant diversity. Sorry about my fuzzy screen. And that's how we will close the night and say goodnight to you all. All right.
you mix every color under the sun, in time you will find that you just have one. You better give them all a chance to shine, otherwise you end up with the same thing. It's a delicate balancing act that applies to you and me. It's the only way we stay intact with a big fat dose of diversity.
Thanks, huge thanks to you again, Shea.
You are very welcome. Thank you guys for coming.
Don't tell them where the last one ended, or where the next tiny little back is. You see, diversity is your friend, and if food only had one flavor, if everything that you said was right, it really wouldn't work to your favor. Variety is the spice of life. There's many, 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 many different kinds. Many, 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 many different places. Many, 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 many different kinds. Many, 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 many different places. Many, many different varieties. Many, many the Dixieland band from heaven. So if you like everything to look the same, just open up and try to get past it. Because it really does make you stronger when you don't put all your eggs in one basket. The more functioning connections, the better. You never know what it will become. Mix it up but keep it together. Let your differences work as one. Because there's many, 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 many different kinds. Many, 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 many different places. Many, 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 many different kinds. Many, 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 many different places. Yeah. Thanks to Harry Jackamar.
All right. Good night, everyone.